Alright, so we won the die roll. Let's see what we got here. This hand seems pretty reasonable. We're going to keep it. We have a turn 2 Bitter Blossom or Auriat Champion, plus Lingering Souls. And just going to start off with a Shambling Vent. We can sack this Marsh Flats for basic planes to get our Auriat Champion into play, but depending on what we're playing against, we're most likely going to want to just play the Bitter Blossom. And it looks like a Search for Tomorrow is going to get suspended here. So that could indicate some sort of a Scapeshift deck that we're up against. Some sort of ramp deck for sure. We know it's pretty likely our opponent has something like Sakura Tribelder as well to go along with the Search for Tomorrow, but we'll see. We're seeing just a basic forest, which means it could just be the 2-color Scapeshift version rather than the 3-color Bring to Light. Or it doesn't need to be Scapeshift, rather. It could be Breach Titan, which doesn't actually play any Scapeshifts. So we drew Inquisition of Kozilek, so I kind of think we just want to play the Inquisition here. We don't know what our opponent's got in hand. Gives us some information. We can also play the Auriat Champion. Our other option is casting Lingering Souls, but let's go ahead and see what's going on here. Okay, so yeah, it looks like the Breach Titan deck. And this hand is pretty good against us. 2 lands, and then we're only going to be able to get one of these coursers with this Inquisition, so our opponent's still going to have another courser left. And our opponent already has Through the Breach and Primeval Titan in hand, but we'll see how this plays out. Just going to cast Auriat Champion here and pass the turn. Unfortunately, Auriat Champion can get shot down by Valakut. That's kind of annoying because Valakut is, of course, not actually a color. So our opponent has a pretty good draw here. What we're really looking for is something like a Thoughtseize to be able to break up this Through the Breach combo. But it looks like our opponent's got an Oath of Nissa on top of their deck, and is threatening to cast Through the Breach next turn. So that's pretty bad for us. We do have Path to Exile. So the Path to Exile can potentially take out the Through the Breach Titan that we're expecting. So we're not going to path the Courser. Unfortunately, we just drew a land for the turn, so let's just go ahead and get in there for a single point, and then we're going to go ahead, cast Lingering Souls, and set up shop here. The Oath on top of our opponent's deck is pretty scary, just because it could find our opponent another Titan, and it looks like our opponent actually has another Titan on top of their deck. So should be interesting to see what our opponent elects to do here. Looks like the play is just starting off with Oath. And this could be trying to find more lands or just getting the second Titan in play. But it does look like the Primeval Titan is the card our opponent's electing to put in their hand. So okay, it looks like here's a Farseek. Interesting. So our opponent is casting Farseek, and that's going to put the 4th mountain in play. And the Courser is also gaining our opponent a good chunk of life here. We want to be able to path the Courser. We're holding the path for these Primeval Titans, and we actually drew a Thoughtseize, which is a pretty good draw here. It means we can take one of the Primeval Titans. We know our opponent's hand is through the breach plus 2 Titans, so we're going to take 1 Titan. And we have this Lingering Souls we can flash back. So this game is pretty interesting. Our opponent's going to get to cast a Primeval Titan and get Valakut online, but we do have a way to get rid of it. Unfortunately, Path isn't that great against this deck, and our opponent found the second Valakut on top of their deck, so that could be the nail in the coffin. That's pretty bad news, because now our opponent's Titan to get 2 mountains, and then even if we kill the Primeval Titan, our opponent is going to get to search up another mountain because of our Path to Exile. So we're at 21, but 21 is not actually a safe life total here. So let's see what our opponent elects to do. It could just be cast through the breach here. It's going to be either... Okay, yeah, there is the through the breach. So we get to gain 1 off the Aria Champion, but our opponent's now going to get to search up those mountains out of their deck. And this Courser is allowing our opponent to stay at a pretty healthy life total. We're going to have to go ahead and path this Primeval Titan. And it looks like our opponent actually got another copy of Valakut. So this mountain that our opponent is going to now get to search for is going... There's going to be 3 triggers that go along with it. And that's not even including the one our opponent's gaining off the Courser. So it'll be interesting to see where our opponent elects to go with these Valakuts. I would expect one of the triggers to go at an Aria Champion, but it looks like they're actually just going all to the face, and we know our opponent now has an Oath of Nissa on top. If that finds yet another Primeval Titan, that could easily be game over. So here's a Lingering Souls. That's not a bad draw because we can cast it and gain some life. And we're also going to be able to clock our opponent for 7. So, yeah, we're going to be able to go up to 17 now on this Lingering Souls. But we're still in danger of dying. We're not in great shape. Our opponent has a land on top. Of course, it's a mountain, so that's probably going to mean just 3 Valakut triggers to the face. And we're likely going to get hit for another 9 damage on our next turn at the bare minimum. So we're really hoping this Oath of Nissa up, and our opponent also had a Farseek, which temporarily forgot about. So, yep, that's gonna be it here. So, let's go on to the next game. We do have some options here for game 2. So we're just gonna board in some more discard, the extra the Duresses, and then Fulminator Mage is pretty good. We can knock out Stomping Ground, Cinderglade, or Valakut itself. So those are the cards you definitely want to bring in. Also, the Anguished Unmaking seems reasonable. The Disenchant seems reasonable. So definitely some options. Worship is another option where in that sort of a game we wouldn't have died from the Valakuts, but our opponent can also just ping away all of our creatures, so I'm not sure that we actually want Worship. Path to Exile doesn't seem great in this matchup because we don't really want to allow our opponent to search for more lands. So I think we just want to cut all of the paths. So Disenchant gets rid of Courser. Anguish the Making can sort of deal with anything, any non-land permanent like a Titan or a Courser. The timely reinforcements are interesting. They gain us life in this matchup, which is nice. But our opponent's not likely to have more creatures than us, so I think we can go ahead and cut the timelies and just go on this more aggressive game plan. We also don't really want the Zealous Persecution. The +1/+1 is nice, but our opponent doesn't have 1 toughness creatures outside of Sakura Tribuilder. So we saw multiple coursers. Maybe we can just board in this Disenchant here. And we'll try this, see how it goes. The courser was actually surprisingly quite annoying. Alright, so let's see what we got here. Got an Inquisition into some action, so gonna keep this one. And I think we probably just want to get going with this Inquisition right away. I think we can lead off on the swamp here and go with an Inquisition. And let's see what our opponent's got. So this is one of the reasons why we Inquisition. We know exactly what's going on. We're looking at a 1-land hand from our opponent. These Oath of Nissas are going to allow our opponent to find more lands, which is pretty annoying. But the Search for Tomorrow being suspended immediately is a form of ramp. So I think we just want to take the Search for Tomorrow here. But those Oath of Nissas are going to be really important for our opponent in terms of finding that second and third land drop. And so you can see that even a mana-hungry deck like Green-Red Breach can operate off of 1 land if given the right cards in hand. And Oath of Nissa, double Oath and Search, I agree with the keep, and it looks like our opponent found a stomping ground off of the Oath. So, drew another Inquisition, so let's go ahead and use that. We'll see. So it looks like our opponent now actually has 2 lands, which is pretty annoying. This Summoner's Pact can find Primeval Titan, so that is definitely one option. We could take the Summoner's Pact and try to cut our opponent off of Titan. So our opponent's hand is pretty good here. I think that's what we want to do, is to try to cut our opponent off of Titan. If our opponent does breach into Titan, things can get pretty bad. We could also take the Courser or the Oath. But I think we just want to take this Summoner's Pact. That was a pretty tough decision. We don't know what the Oath is going to get, and the Courser coming down on turn 3 is definitely a threat. We could, however, draw removal for the Courser. Here we can just go ahead and sack this Marsh Flats just to thin our deck at this point. Lingering Souls into Gideon is pretty reasonable. So it looks like our opponent's pretty likely to just play the Courser here. Yep, there's the Courser. So, okay, that's a good draw. We drew Intangible Virtue. So we can play Virtue and get in for 4 and flashback the Lingering Souls. I think I actually like that more than playing Gideon because, well, we bring our opponent down to 11, and then on next turn we can make a Gideon emblem and actually threaten lethal damage next turn. So that's pretty good news. Our opponent does have the Courser, though, which could allow some life to be gained. But I think we're still in quite good shape here. Yeah, so if we make a Gideon emblem, and it actually looks like our opponent has Anger of the Gods on top of their deck, and actually drew one during these few turns. So that's pretty annoying. Not gonna lie. So, alright, our draw is Slaughter Pact. That's an interesting one. So we're definitely going to play this Gideon that we have. And we can actually go ahead and Slaughter Pact away this Courser Prefix as well. And I think that's probably the play. We just want to get the Courser off the table and stop our opponent from gaining any sort of advantage with it. It does mean that we're going to have to use our next turn paying for this pact, but it seems like a reasonable price to pay. We now know our opponent has Anger of the Gods in hand, is likely playing multiples after board, which is to be expected, but it's certainly worth being aware of. So we'll see what can be found off this Oath of Nissa. We really don't want our opponent to find a Primeval Titan. Okay, it's Sakura Tribe Elder, so could have been worse, definitely. So here we're just going to go ahead and pay for the pact. We drew Anguished Unmaking, so I actually just like plussing the Gideon here, and we can put our opponent in a tough situation just by dealing a good chunk of damage. And we'll see if our opponent actually has... Okay, no. So our opponent did not have it there, and even though we got Anger of the Gods cast against us, and it was pretty good, it wasn't devastating, and so Gideon was a nice follow-up to have. As far as the sideboard, I think we sideboarded pretty well. Don't think we want the pass. They're just too much of a liability in this matchup, which means we're banking on drawing some of our other removal. But that seems fine. Yeah, let's just try this. So here we have a pretty clunky hand, just because it's 5 lands, 2 spells, but since it is Virtue into Procession, I think we just keep it. But if our opponent has an explosive draw, we really want to draw some sort of disruption. Looks like our opponent might need land since we're seeing the Wooded Foothills being found off of this Oath. But we're just going to start on Shambling Vent and plan on playing Virtue into Procession. That line is vulnerable to Anger of the Gods, but sometimes you just have to hope that they don't have it, and that may be one of those types of games here. So we're just going to crack a fetch and make sure to get a Plains so that we can play our Procession on turn 3. It has been a little bit unfortunate that we haven't drawn any spells in our past couple draw steps, but hopefully that's going to change. Wow, that's really quite good against us. Our opponent has Reclamation Sage, so our Intangible Virtue is about to bite the dust here. And looks looks like another Oath, so definitely hoping our opponent doesn't have Primeval Titan in hand. And it looks like Mountain was revealed off of the Oath. And so we have the option now of casting Inquisition or casting the Procession. I think it's a pretty close decision, but we just want to cast the Spectral Procession this turn and try to get something going. We don't know anything about our opponent's hand. It could be that our opponent's holding something like an Anger of the Gods, but I think we just have to get some sort of pressure going, or else we're just going to be overwhelmed. The game is not looking great for us at the moment. We don't know what our opponent's got. Here, I think we just want to go ahead and trade one of our Spirit tokens, because we don't have any pump effects in hand, so we're fine with just making that trade. And it could be our opponent just cast something like an Anger of the Gods, but it looks like it's actually going to be P and Kiran Nalaar. So we drew Bitter Blossom for the turn. Now I like casting the Inquisition, seeing what's going on. Alright, so our opponent actually does have that Primeval Titan, and we have no answers for it in our hand at the moment. So that's not great. But let's just play this Bitter Blossom. Hope that our opponent doesn't immediately draw the 6th land, and we can come up with something to answer this Primeval Titan. This looks like it could be a Through the Breach. I don't know. Our opponent's tapping a bunch of mana. It actually is Through the Breach. So that's quite bad for us. It might actually be lethal this turn. We'll see. Our opponent can search for double Valakut, get 2 mountains here, and yeah, this is really bad. That's gonna be 12 damage. Yeah, so we're actually just dead here. So yeah, not a great matchup, but our draws didn't really line up well either this game. So, all right.